All right, so we're talking about combining different transformations. Let's bring your attention to this statement right here when it comes to combining transformation. It says horizontal and vertical transformations are independent. So it does not matter whether horizontal or vertical transformations are performed first. However, when you do combine, or I'm sorry, whenever you do vertical transformations, the order in which you do them is important. So first we need to make sure it's written in the proper form, and then you have to stretch or compress by A, and then vertically shift by K. So that's very specific, as well as when we perform the horizontal transformations, it has to make sure that it's in this form. And we are going to horizontally stretch or compress, and then we are going to shift. So the order matters. All right, so it says, given the table for f of x, create a table of values of g of x given this transformation. So the first thing that you should do is to really identify what changes are being made and how. So let's identify the x changes. So the x changes are going to be found in the parentheses. So the x changes are going to be multiplied by 1/3. Remember, we're trying to get it back to x. Okay, so we're going to multiply by 1/3, which means that since we're multiplying by 1/3, it is going to be a compression. Okay. So my new tables are going to be multiplied by 1/3. So let's make a chart here. So my x, 1/3 of 6 is 2. 1/3 of 12 is 4. Then 6, and then 8. Okay. So I'm done with all of my x changes. Now I'm going to identify my y changes. So there's the 2.
Okay, I'm coming in a sec here.
And then there's the +1. But according to this, we have to stretch by a first, calculate the a first, and then shift. So we are going to take our y coordinates, multiply by 2, and then add 1. So we're going to multiply by 2. So now we're going to get 20, we get 28, we get 30, and we get 34. And then don't forget we need to add 1 to each one of those. And so it looks like my g of x is going to be 21, 29, 31, and 35. All right, so now we're supposed to sketch the graph given this transformation here. The very first thing I highly recommend that you do is identify the beginning and the ending and a point where it kind of changes direction. So we actually have over here the point -2, 0. We've got the point 0, 2, and then we've also got the point 2, 0. Now I could also make that into a table. -2, 0, 0, 2, and 2, 0. That means the same thing. So let's identify what my x changes are. So x changes. Notice that it is not in the proper form. So I need to rewrite this so that it fits the proper form. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor out the 1/2. Okay, so I've always got to factor out the b value so that I have a 1 right in front of that x. And if you remember, when you factor something out, if I were to go 1/2 x plus 1, and then factor out the 1/2, then I'm essentially dividing by 1/2. And so I'm going to have x plus 2. And if you were to check, you would multiply it back out. So 1/2 x plus 1, and I'm good. So if I were to do this, I'm going to get in the proper form, which means the first thing I need to do is to multiply by 2, then subtract 2. Okay, so I am going to take each one of my x's. So I've got -2 times 2, -4 minus 2, and that's -6. So the new chart, when I had -2, I'm going to end up with -6. So now I'm going to do the same thing. 0 times 2 minus 2. And then now I've got 2 times 2 minus 2. It's going to be 2. So I'm done with my x changes. Now let's go ahead and look at my y changes. Okay, so my y changes are going to just be subtracting 3. And that's because of that guy right there. So I've got 0 minus 3. That's going to be -3, -1, and -3. So now I've got 6, -3. I'm sorry, -6, -3. I've got -2, -1. And then I've got 2, -3. And you can see that this is going to be that transformation.